Hey gang, what's up? Welcome back to the harsh lighting of the Intuitive Angling Tackle Room, where you got not so great video quality, but you get hardcore hogging tips here that you're not going to get anywhere else, I can promise you that. And today we're going to give you guys some tips and advice on speed cranking. Speed cranking with squarebill crankbaits, specifically in the summertime, specifically right now. We've got a really good technique to share with you guys here. Going to go over it in detail. And I think it's going to catch you some really good fish, you know, between now and the end of September. Real quick, if you're interested in any of the squarebills that I'm talking about, you can get them at Baitworks. I'll include the link in the description. And using that link's always a really good way to help the channel out here. Much appreciated. And also, you can get you some old school jigs if you check the link out here in the description there. And one other thing, we're getting ready to come out with a new color on the Blocked Old School jig. I've got them right here. As soon as we get a stock build up, we're going to do the video on it so you guys can order them and get this new color. I think you guys will really like it. Okay guys, speed cranking. Let's get into this a little bit here. I don't know if you guys know it or not, but the squarebill crankbait, it really came to fame here in the Ozarks. The Ozarks is responsible for so many different cutting edge techniques, you know, jerkbait fishing, a lot of walking topwater stuff, you know, big spinner baits, burning big spinner baits. Sort of been the founding ground for a lot of that. And the same with squarebill crankbaits. There were guys catching them on squarebills here back in the mid 70s when the big O's came out. And there's been a lot of different changes in the squarebills. Just a real quick history lesson here on the squarebills. You know, it was started out with the Big O, Cordell Big O, years ago. And then Bagley sort of knocked that squarebill off. It was sort of the mainstay, you know, for many years. There was a lot of guys started hand making them. The handmade squarebill crankbaits really, you know, dominated for a long time. They still do a little bit. And then you started getting into some of the high-tech squarebill technology, like the Megabass S cranks that I'm going to talk about here today, that really took it up a notch in terms of components and color options. So that's one issue of it. The main thing we're going to talk about is the technique of speed cranking. First of all, let's talk about the water that you have to find it in, where this works here. Speed cranking is going to work good in man-made reservoirs. I don't really do much on it in natural bodies of water. It's mainly a technique that was reserved for man-made lakes, where you have feeder creeks and a diversity of different water clarity and cover. Most of the speed cranking I do is around rock or some type of wood, lay down, stumps, that type of stuff, different type of rocky banks, riprap, rock transition, that type of deal. The thing that I'm looking for the speed cranking in any man-made impoundment is some type of off-colored water. It doesn't have to be real dirty, but it needs to be off-colored. And you guys hear me talk about that a lot. If you guys have watched the channel much the last month, you know, you hear me talk a lot about off-colored water in the summer, because that's really a key to catching shallow fish, and specifically speed cranking with the squarebill. So what I'm trying to do in that situation is, first of all, I'm usually in the river portions of the lake or the upper creek arms or whatever part of the lake has got that, you know, off-colored water. When I'm talking off-colored water for speed cranking, I'm talking water visibilities of, say, 8 inches to maybe a foot and a half, something like that. That's the key window, and that window's key. You don't want it less than 8 inches of water, because part of speed cranking, it's a combination of a sight bite and a water displacement bite. So you have to have enough visibility for them to track the bait, but you don't want it to get too clear, where simply they're just not going to bite a squarebill in that water column very good. So again, 8 inches to, you know, foot and a half is going to be ideal with that. So the main thing on the technique is, like I said, you got to choose the right squarebill for the most part. A lot of squarebills, they come in like a 1.5 size, which tends to be the smaller, 2.5 size, and like 3-point size. This is the Megabass 1.5, which resembles like the 2.5 in most squarebills that are out on the market. It's the sort of the mid-range, and I like the mid-range size for this speed cranking here. I think that the combination of the size of the bait and the way it displaces water, how it moves in the water, I think it's a good size for the speed cranking. Like I said, a lot of different options out there. This is just the one I prefer, the S crank here, but There's a ton of good square bills out there, including, you know, the custom made ones. They all can be pretty good. Talk about color here first before I get into the actual technique. There's basically two color patterns that I use. I'll use some type of a bright chartreuse blackback or some type of a perch pattern, like you know, some bluegill pattern. And if the water is on the dirtier side towards that 8 inches of visibility side, and also I almost always start out in the morning with a brighter color like that, because under the low light conditions, those bigger fish are going to hit the brighter color right off the bat. It usually does not last throughout the course of a day unless the water's really dirty or it's dark and raining, that type of stuff. Normally at about 9:30, 10 o'clock, I'm changing up to some type of a shad pattern. Even in the dirtier water, even if you've got, you know, a foot of visibility, a shad pattern will get you more bites. As that sun gets up, it gets a little bit brighter. But this is basically the two color patterns that I use. So the main part of the thing, which is the juice of this video, is the actual speed cranking technique itself. Speed cranking is designed to generate a reaction strike, and it's designed to pull fish away from shallow cover that are sort of not aggressive and that wouldn't hit like a slower bait, like if you pitched a jig or a creature bait in there, or if you slow rolled a spinner bait past there, or if you threw a crankbait in there and just brought it in there at like medium retrieve. Most of the time when you're dealing with really shallow water, hot water, dirty water bass, they're sort of lethargic a little bit. They're not real active, simply because a lot of times the oxygen levels are a little bit lower, and it's just sort of the mood and the personality of the fish that you have in those conditions. So the way you generate that strike is through speed of retrieve. So what I'm doing with this is I'm throwing it out there, and I'm not burning it like as fast as I can, but I'm throwing it out there and I'm just reeling it as what I consider a fast retrieve, stop and go. So I'm cranking it 2 or 3 times, I'll stop it, 2 or 3 times, stop it, 2 or 3 times, stop it, like that. I never want to have a consistent speed of a high speed retrieve in there without that stop and go. The stop and go is the key, because, you know, probably, you know, reel it like that, stop it, reel it like that, stop it. And about 90% of the strikes that you're going to get are going to come after you stop it and you make the first crank or two after that initial pause there. There's something about that just triggers them real good with that. So a lot of it also depends when you're talking about the exact speed of it. I'm using a 7-to-1 gear ratio reel. I'm real comfortable with that. You need to use a 7-to-1. You don't want to use something slower. I don't like to use anything faster, because a lot of times you'll blow the crankbait out to the side sometimes. 7-to-1 works really good. And you sort of have to experiment a little bit with the exact speed of the bait, because what happens is there's a fine line between getting that speed right if you're fishing 1.5 feet of visibility, and getting that speed right if you're fishing 8 inches of visibility. Generally, if the water is more on that 1.5 feet clarity, a little bit on the cleaner side, that's when I'm going to the upper end of my speed, when I'm really fishing it like as fast as I think they will possibly hit it. And if it's more on the 8-inch visibility, I'm still fishing it fast, but not quite as fast. I want them to have a little bit more time to be able to see the thing, but I'm still cranking it pretty fast, stop and go. The other thing with that, guys, is you have got to be hitting something. If you're not hitting something when you're burning a crankbait, you're not going to catch many bass. If you're just throwing it out there and reeling it in, and once in a while it bumps something like that, you'll catch a few. But you need to throw that bait where it's knocking something throughout a lot of the distance of the cast. So if I'm fishing a riprap bank or rocky bank, I make sure that I position my boat where I'm parallel, where I'm knocking those rocks almost constantly on the retrieve. If I'm fishing laydowns or stumps, I want to make sure I get right in the middle of that, and that bait's coming over limbs and it's knocking off the side of the stump, getting hung up quite a bit. That's when you're going to trigger those strikes. That is so critical with that, is to get that bait in tight and bounce it off something. Most of the time with this situation, I'm using a fairly soft rod. The rod that I use for it is that Megabass Launcher. It's a 7-foot 11-inch rod. It's got a fairly soft tip on it. And most of the time I'm using 17, 20-pound test Seaguar and Vizex line with it. A lot of guys use mono, but I found out if I go to a soft tip on my rod, I can get by using the fluorocarbon, so that works pretty good with me. So anyway, guys, give it a try. Give the speed cranking a try. Find some dirty, shallow water, get some cover, get you some good square bills. Like I said, big selection at Baitworks, link in the description there. And you know, good way to catch some quality fish. It's not a small fish deal. You can catch a lot of good fish on it this time of year. And as that water level drops in late summer and fall, it even gets better on there. It isolates the cover, makes it a little bit more obvious. So anyway, guys, hope it catches you a few. Thanks for tuning in, and please hit that subscribe button if you don't mind, and we'll talk later. See you.